going to show you the procedure for replacing the rear shock on your Polaris ATV. Before I do that though, I want to talk about shock options. So if you just need to see the procedure, feel free to skip ahead. All the Polaris ATVs built from the early 90s into the late 90s uses a shock similar to the one shown here. This is not a rebuildable shock. If it's bad, you'll need to find a replacement. The Polaris dealer offers a replacement shock for about $150. If you have a late 90s Sport 400 or Scrambler 400 built up through the early 2000s, then you have a reservoir shock that was built by Fox. This is a rebuildable shock, and you can ship it off and have it rebuilt for about $100. If you have one of the older Polaris ATVs and you're looking for an affordable alternative, you can pick up one of these Fox rebuildable shocks from eBay from anywhere from $50 to $120. And these are the exact same length as the original shock used on the 90s era ATVs, and so you can install them without making any modifications. You'll need to jack up the rear end so that the swing arm doesn't have any load on it. So take your bottle jack, lift up the rear end, and then slide a set of blocks underneath to hold it. Once you have the rear end blocked, there's really only two bolts to hold the shock in place. This lower bolt is really easy to access and remove. You only need a 9/16 socket and a 9/16 wrench. And you can take it right out. Keep track of any washers or replace any washers that may be missing. Removing the top bolt is more of a challenge. It's very difficult to access even when using a wrench. The only method I've found that seems to work is to use two ratchet wrenches with 9/16 sockets. If you don't have a second 9/16 socket, then you can use a 14mm metric socket in its place. So the trick is, you have to mount one of the ratchets on this side to hold the head of the bolt. Then you have to undo the socket and fit it over the nut on this side, and then just put this in far enough that you can turn it. Eventually you'll be able to snap it in once the nut gets loose far enough. Unfortunately, a deep well socket will not fit in here. A little bit of time and effort, you can get this nut off to the point where you can turn it with your fingers and remove it. And now, removing your ratchet from the other side and push the bolt out and remove it. Now, your shock is free. So now to replace the shock, we just reverse the process. We fit the new shock into the slot, and then you'll kind of have to move it around until you can get the bolt to slide through. Once the bolt is through, finger tighten the nut. And then use the ratchet wrenches to finish tightening the bolt. You'll need to remember as you're tightening it with the ratchet to undo the socket and fit it over the nut to do the final tightening. Otherwise, it won't fit deep enough to tighten the nut all the way. On the bottom, put your shock in and use a screwdriver to line up the shock. Insert the bolt. Install the nut. Then use your socket and wrench to tighten it up. The last step is to remove the blocks from under your ATV, reinstall the rear plastics, and then you're ready to go. If you do need to adjust the compression on the spring, you can turn this nut with a pair of channel locks. And the same is true of the type that have notches. No special tools required. So go out and have some fun.